The family of a New York City landlord who lost his life to COVID-19 is being sued by his lender after he was forced to take out a loan to cover his expenses during the pandemic due to the state's eviction moratorium. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have a tragic story for you today, and it's tragic on many accounts. Mostly because, simply put, a landlord got caught up in the state's eviction moratorium up in New York State. And he was a landlord of rent-controlled buildings, and a lot of his tenants just stopped paying rent. So what did he do? He reached out to a lender so that he could get a loan, just so that he could pay back, pay his expenses, pay for, utilities and maintenance and everything else that's required. But, now that lender is suing him, but unfortunately, since he passed away, it is, just a nightmare for his family, okay? Now, the protections, those COVID-19 pandemic protections that were put into place to protect the tenants, they didn't do anything for landlords, okay? They didn't do anything for them. So here we have a landlord who truly was suffering due to the pandemic and lost his life, and now his family is just stuck in this cycle of debt and these lawsuits, and we had all these tenants put into place who just weren't paying, and it's just a completely unfair situation, and I absolutely hate this story because it encompasses everything that's wrong with the whole situation. Now, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think of this sort of situation where we have a landlord who not only has to deal with rent control and all that, but then had their source of income taken away by the government, and then was forced to go out and get these high interest, unsecured loans that could put you in financial ruin just so you could survive. And that's awful, okay? No landlord should have ever been put into this situation. But when the government said, hey, your tenants don't have to pay rent anymore, and then they didn't give the landlord any sort of financial help, then what did they expect was going to happen, okay? The landlord, was just trying to stave off complete ruin. Okay, that's where the landlord was at when this whole thing happened, and I'm not happy about this. But this is an example, and I need to show these examples out there for all those people who think that all landlords are super rich and they're going to be just fine. That's not the case in this situation. That's not the case in the majority of situations. Okay, so let's get into this article, and it's coming from the New York Post, and it says, New York City landlord on life support sued by lender over COVID loans dies, family lawyer. Yeah, like I said, it's tragic because, he ended up passing away from coronavirus, and, now his family's stuck in this situation. The family of a Bronx landlord who was clinging to life when he was hit with 2 lawsuits over a loan he was forced to take out during the pandemic-related rent moratorium is now considering suing the lender after he died over the weekend, the family's lawyer said. Jeffrey Schneider, 62, was on life support after contracting COVID-19 when Premier Capital Funding, LLC, filed the suits to claw back $58,000 on a $23,000 high-interest loan he took out in May through his company, Remy Realty Corp., after many of his struggling tenants stopped paying rent, according to court papers filed by Schneider's wife last month. So yeah, this landlord had to take out this high-interest loan just to get by. And he only took it out in May. So think about the amount of time that this landlord was probably struggling through this entire thing, okay? So the eviction moratoriums were going on for over a year before he finally had to take out this high-interest loan. So he probably went through all of his savings, all of his emergency reserves, and just couldn't survive. The fact that these units, this apartment building that this guy owned, were rent control on top of that, So it's not like you can raise the rents to get some of that income back. No, you're stuck. You're stuck in a horrible situation. And now we have the government telling you, well, you can't raise rents. You can't evict anybody. You just have to sit there and you have to be the homeless shelter for all of these people, even if that bankrupts you, which it darn near did, because, why else would you be taking out this kind of high interest loan just to pay your bills, okay? This landlord was facing financial ruin. Oh my God. Now the family is considering suing the lender over its allegedly shady loan agreement with Remy and Schneider, who died Sunday after being on a ventilator and life support since November 29th. The last moments the Schneider family members were together, they were thinking about how could they get out of this financial situation? How could they get out of this debt? How could they stop these vultures from circling, the family lawyer Ashley Colonna Cohen told the Post. They should have been able to spend those moments talking about how much they loved each other and how much they meant to each other and being able to let go in peace. Well, I don't know the situation that's going on with the lender, okay? It's a bad situation overall, but my issue is that this landlord should have never been in this situation in the first place, okay? And it wasn't just the eviction moratorium that did this. It was the policies from New York State that put rent control over this landlord's building, where this landlord couldn't make enough money to cover the expenses, even if some of the, because I know that the rent is expensive in a place like New York City, but when you own a building like this, where you can't increase your rent amounts to cover the higher costs of things, when you can't even cover the cost of inflation. Inflation was 7% last year. This guy couldn't even have risen his rents 7% to just match inflation because of rent control. And then you throw the eviction moratorium on top of that, and you've got a whole bunch of rent-controlled tenants who are already getting a great deal by living in a place way cheaper than they should have been able to live in, and they're not paying rent on top of that. I mean, this is why I say that, tenants are the ones who are abusing the system more often than not, okay? So I have no sympathy for these tenants whatsoever. But this landlord and his family, I mean, they got screwed. They got screwed over completely. Schneider sought the lifeline when the pandemic state eviction moratorium forced his company into dire financial straits, according to the court papers filed by his wife, Cindy. The landlord of the rent-controlled Bronx apartment building managed to pay back $25,000 of the roughly $35,000 he owed on the high-interest loan before coronavirus landed the fully vaccinated man in the hospital on November 7th, where he remained until he died, leaving him unable to run his business, the filing said. Yeah, so he ended up getting coronavirus, like a lot of people did, and passing away. But where the tenants had eviction protections, he didn't have any foreclosure protections. He didn't have, suddenly his lenders didn't say, the New York State didn't say, hey, well, your lenders can't collect any money if somebody's actually financially suffering because of coronavirus. No. Simply put, the landlords were picked on as the only people who, couldn't collect the debts that were owed to them due to the coronavirus. Meanwhile, everyone else got, still had to be paid, including New York State itself, demanding their tax money. Okay, this is a complete joke, a travesty, honestly. And I don't, like I said, I'm not going into what the lender is saying or what the family's grievance against this lender is, because the situation was caused by the state. It was caused by the government that said that this landlord couldn't collect the money that was owed to him. Okay? That's what caused the situation. There wouldn't have even been a loan in the first place if not for that. So yeah, this landlord got screwed over, and now they're dealing with a more predatory lender because he had to get a loan from somebody to survive, and I'm sure he tried. It says here he tried to pay it back. So it wasn't like he was just letting his debts go unpaid like the tenants were. Okay, he was actually working to pay the debt off. Now that didn't happen, so now his estate might be on the hook for the balance of it. So it says here, Premier Capital then filed the two suits against Schneider and didn't back down even when Cindy informed them he was on death's door and offered to repay the $11,000 remaining balance on the loan, she alleged in the papers filed last month. We are reserving every single one of our rights that we have and plan on asserting those rights in court against this company. We're not going to take this lying down, Kalana Cohen said. Remy Realty ceased to exist with Jeffrey's passing, and under the agreement, they shouldn't be permitted to enforce this any longer. We already know the legality of the collections process is questionable. I would go so far as to say that they were unlawful. There are huge, glaring, obvious problems between what the lender has advertised the product to be and how they represented the product to Jeffrey and what it actually was, Kalana Cohen said of the loan agreement. Premier Capital and a lawyer for the company did not immediately return requests for comment.